Hello, welcome to part 3 of Genealogy in 3 parts. My name is Susan Court. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I am an amateur genealogist. I have been doing genealogy seriously for over 7 years, researching and writing about the heritage of my and others' families. I am also the author of 9 published articles with 2 more to be published in the next few months. Genealogy is my avocation and one that I truly love. I hope these presentations on researching, recording, and chronicling your family's story will give you as much joy as genealogy has given me. Normally, I give this presentation in person, but of course that is not feasible under current circumstances. During the in-person presentations, I distribute a handout with materials, like sample forms, that could be useful to the amateur genealogists, but do not lend themselves to a PowerPoint presentation. However, I would be happy to send you the materials. At the end of this presentation, I will give you my email address so that you may contact me. To start, I need to mention that the views stated in this presentation are mine and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Arlington Office of Adult Senior Programs or any of its officers or staff. Likewise, neither the office nor I endorse a particular service, product, or publication discussed in the presentation. Today's presentation will focus on chronicling your family's history. I will cover these 4 topics. First, I'll go over a couple preliminary matters. Then I'll start with the basics. Next, I will review how to choose an appropriate medium. Finally, I'll go through a case study. As a preliminary matter, I'd like to quickly review what I covered in Part 1 and Part 2. In Part 1, I discussed manual or in-person research, reaching out to family members to collect records and looking for records located, for example, in government repositories, libraries, and cemeteries. To this end, I encouraged you to get the lay of the land before you travel to a community. There are many guides, state, national, and wiki, for example, to check first to see what types of documents might be available. I told you about the phenomenal library in Salt Lake City operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the library's local family history centers. I also discussed electronic or online research where I compared and contrasted the big 4 research companies, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage.com, FindMyPast.com, and FamilySearch.org. In addition, I covered related online services like newspapers.com, Google, and the social networks. Finally, I explained how DNA analysis can be used in genealogical research and discussed the major commercial companies, Ancestry DNA, MyHeritage DNA, Family Tree DNA, Living DNA, and 23andMe. In Part 2, I went over how to record the results of your research manually and electronically. For manual record keeping, there are many standardized forms available online, or, of course, you can create your own. For electronic record keeping, there are 5 major software programs available that will not only help you organize your records, but also produce many kinds of charts and reports. To the extent the software programs are integrated with the online research companies, they also can simplify your research by giving you hints like the shaky leaf of Ancestry.com. Finally, in Part 2, I conducted a few exercises to show how researching online can interact with software programs. Because I mentioned these stories along the way in this presentation, I want to give you an overview of what I've done to chronicle family history, mine and my friends. And the photo, by the way, is my parents' wedding picture. So let's get started. First, do not try doing it all. My original goal was to write the magnum opus of my parents, weaving together the stories of all 4 branches of my family. After I was released from the straitjacket, I figured out how to maintain my sanity. Pick one person, or pick one event, or one branch, or pick one branch with the focus on one person, which is my favorite way to go to date. Second, decide who your audience is. My story about Joseph Klein, a distant cousin, was written as a thank you for the help that his grandniece by several degrees, Voltraud Krieger, who is my fifth cousin, gave me in writing the Schlosser story. She lives in Glassweiler, Germany. I inserted a map of the United States with Indiana highlighted and a map of Indiana with Cass County, where he settled, highlighted in the story. Obviously, I wouldn't have used the map of the United States for an American audience. Third, figure out your timing. I wrote the Kaposha story for my friend as a Christmas present for her children and grandchildren. That set the deadline. It took a year, by the way, to complete. Fourth, assess and organize your research data, including memorabilia and family stories. Do you have information beyond the bare facts? Do you have memories, recollections, or even lore that would add color to your story? Fifth, collect family photographs and documents that you may want to include. 6. Assemble historical background. Especially for the younger generations, it helps put your story in an historical context. 7th, evaluate your resources and technical skills. Are you computer savvy? Can you type? How adept are you negotiating the internet? 8th, determine your budget for the project. These projects can get expensive, so be aware of costs before you start along a certain path. And finally, outline the story, not necessarily chronologically. Try to avoid rabbit holes and digressions. I have to be especially careful because I love history, and I've frequently been tempted to do data dumps. Not everyone is that interested, so you run the risk of losing your audience if you put too much in. But what follows are just suggestions. The medium you choose and the amount of information you convey are mainly a function of your imagination, creativity, and determination. There are many other ways of telling your family's story. Articles, newsletters, websites, blogs, and even cookbooks of family recipes, just to name a few. My favorite way to chronicle family history is writing a story. I have also been able to extrapolate interesting events or people from those stories and turn them into articles. For example, my grand-uncle Alf Port's role in a murder investigation in the 1890s, my great-grandfather Joe Schlosser's fame as the Ice King of Kenton County, a real page-turner, and my grand-uncle Joe Summer playing for the first Cincinnati Reds baseball team. And as we all know, the Reds were the original Major League Baseball team. I've divided the topic of choosing the right medium into two parts. Using the features available from your online research company or on your desktop genealogy program, and using your computer word processing program to compose a story and then picking a way to publish it. At one time, these two features were very distinct operations. You used the online databases, like Ancestry.com, to research your heritage, and you used a software program, like Family Tree Maker, to record and organize what you found. Now, however, online research companies let you create trees and record sources, and software programs now embrace online features such as automated searching and syncing with websites. With this caveat, I will address the two separately for this presentation, just is simpler that way. First, though, to get our bearings, let's look again at information from Part 2 video, the online research companies and the software programs with which they are integrated. If you're only using a research company like Ancestry.com, you have access to some really cool options to tell your family's history through My Canvas that allows you to build your family history book from scratch using its family history book templates or downloading your research information directly from Ancestry. You can auto-generate a book with a family tree, record pages, family group sheets, and timelines using professionally designed templates that you can customize with photos, text, and more. You can print pages on your home printer for free or let the company print your book professionally. And there are other options that are less ambitious but still let you tell your story. Here's how My Canvas works. First, you go to the main page of Ancestry.com and click on Order Photo Books and Posters. That will bring you to this page with the various options: photo books, calendars, posters, family history. So here are the options under photo books, different sizes mainly. Here's the calendar page. Next, collage posters. I want to play with this one a little bit more, so I select a size. That brings me to this page, and I select my family tree, which is in my father's name. That in turn brings up all the information and photos I've saved there. I pick the ones for my family and my siblings, and voila, I have a photo display. Let's pick another one. This time it's a family tree poster. I repeat the process, picking my Ancestry.com tree. And voila again, I have a poster that I can order. Pretty neat, huh? So let me show you a feature available from FamilySearch.org. It's called a fan chart. It's another way of showing your pedigree. That is your ancestors, your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And remember, these are your ancestors, not your aunts and uncles or grand-aunts or uncles. Only your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so forth and so on. This particular fan chart comes from the family of a gentleman I met last year at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. They printed it out for him for free. And here's one I created on my own using this feature on FamilySearch.org. I copied it to a flash drive or USB drive and took it to Kinko's, which for about $2 printed out an 11 by 17 inch copy in color. Let's turn to using the publication options available from a software program. As I mentioned in the last video, I use Family Tree Maker. Here's a screenshot of my grandfather's entry where I pointed out two things: the publish link and the person note link. Before I hit the publish link, I want to show you something I typed in the person notes field. Okay, so now let's go back to what happens if I press publish. It brings up this page where there are two selections that will give me publication options: a genealogy report and a person report. Note that the book selection just takes you to my canvas. And here are examples of those two types of reports for my great-grandfather, Joe Schlosser. There is another option related to, but separate from Family Tree Maker. There is a company called Family Book Creator that will produce books based on what you've entered into your Family Tree Maker program. The third method of chronicling family history is my favorite: writing a story using my word processor and then choosing a way to publish it. I'll talk shortly about some of the techniques I've used to write the stories, but now let me talk about the publication methods. The main media options for your own compositions include photo books, do-it-yourself projects, print on demand, also known as POD, publisher for hire, and ebooks. The option you choose will depend on the number of copies you need and whether you intend to sell your story for profit, give copies as gifts, or make copies available for purchase only to relatives. Option number 1 is a photo book produced by a photo book service. The upside of photo book services, like Shutterfly or even Walgreens, is that they offer a customizable layout, high-quality paper, attractive templates in a range of colors and themes, and a really good-looking cover. You start by picking a template which comes with a selection of backgrounds and page layouts, then upload photos as JPEG files and add narrative. In essence, you let the photos and document images tell the story, helped along with explanatory captions. There are 5 essential elements for a photo book that I've listed here. Several of these elements apply equally, by the way, to other media as well. Don't limit yourself just to photos of people. Consider including family homes, burial sites, churches, or other buildings important to family history. Perhaps add a family tree or a timeline. Include some narrative, at least to explain who is in the pictures. Perhaps add a page with an overview of the family's story. Weave in some actual documents like draft registrations or birth certificates or marriage certificates. Put the family in its geographic context by including a map or two. The downside of photo books is the expense. Another media option is to do it yourself, completely or in part. For example, you can print your document and staple it. You can jazz up this copy by using heavy-duty color paper for the front and the back. Or you can print the document and enclose it in plastic covers and put it in a binder. The plastic covers with holes can be purchased at Staples, Home Depot, or on Amazon. This looks nice, but it's a real challenge to make a lot of copies. Finally, you can print your story yourself or have it printed and then bound at a copy center like Kinko's or Staples. This option works well if you want multiple copies. You can email the file to your local copy shop or take it in on a flash drive, which will result in better images than photocopying your printouts. A copy shop can also provide cardstock for a cover and even bind your book with, for example, saddle stitching. Pages are stapled down the middle and folded, a spiral, that's like a notebook, or perfect binding, which resembles a paperback book with a printed spine. Going to a copy shop is simple and quick, but it may not be the most cost-effective option. Black and white copies generally start around 10 cents a page, but the charges quickly add up for color printing, better quality paper, two-sided pages, and binding. You'll usually get discounts, however, for multiple copies of the same booklet. Get quotes from several shops because prices can vary greatly. Pod self-publishing sites like Lulu and Blurb let you create a book on your own computer and upload it as a PDF file for printing. You set the sale price and order copies as needed, or send a link to relatives so they can purchase their own copies. Pod costs more than working directly with a printer, which is our next option, that offers volume discounts. But Pod means you don't have to buy a lot of books up front that may end up collecting dust in your attic. The Pod printer gets a percentage of your sales. You even can sell your book commercially. If the book is available through Amazon, it also gets a cut. For example, a $14.95 Lulu book purchased on Amazon nets the author $1.58, but the same book purchased straight from Lulu nets the author close to $8. You'll need to format your book in a document according to the POD's specifications for file type, image resolution, margin size, etc., and create a cover. Most sites provide helpful instructions and templates, and some will do this work for you for a fee. This option, by the way, is recommended for skilled computer users. When you work directly with a book printer, whether online or in your local area, there's no continuing arrangement between you and the printer as with POD. Instead, you supply the files for your book, order a minimum number of copies, and then the print service prints them. If you have a large family and everybody wants a copy, working with a printer may be your most cost-effective option. Printers require you to submit fully prepared files, usually PDFs, that meet their specifications. Most publishers offer more personalized guidance and add-on services than a POD site would. Self-publishers like Genealogy House can help with writing, editing, graphic design, and other aspects of the publishing process. Great if you have a long, complex book combining text and images. This slide is from the Family Tree magazine, which gives you an overview of the costs associated with the various options for publishing your own composition, with one exception, which I'll mention now. But I'll give you a couple minutes to look at this slide. The exception I want to mention is ebooks that can be viewed on an e-reader device such as Kindle, Nook, or iPads. You will need to check out the requirements for each of these companies, but generally the cost is less than the published books. One thing to keep in mind, however, that not all of your intended audience may use e-readers. And there is a really cheap alternative. You can create your own e-book by simply PDFing your document and emailing it to your family, or copying it to a flash drive and mailing the flash drive to your family. And of course, you can mix and match. You may have to offer your story in both printed and electronic versions. I did that for my Schlosser family. The story was close to 250 pages long, so I only made about 10 copies for first and second cousins who did not have computers. And I distributed almost 100 copies on a USB drive. The last thing I'd like to do in this video is share some pointers that I have picked up in writing 9 family stories. Quickly, what I'll do is cover acknowledgments, format, and narrative. As I mentioned in the first video, your research must start with your own family, whose members will give you facts, stories, and even lore that you may want to weave in to your story. As I mentioned also, depending on your age, your second cousins may be your most valuable sources. But whether your personal sources are second cousins or third cousins once removed, it is appropriate to give them a shout out in your work. It not only underscores the credibility of your material, it also keeps peace in the family. With respect to format, I'll cover these topics: chronological versus hourglass approach, layout, and footnotes versus endnotes. A chronological approach is perhaps the easiest way to write your family history. I've tried it but found myself wandering. I prefer an hourglass approach where I pick one person, usually a great-grandfather, and focus on him. I've listed here some of the things you need to keep in mind using this approach, or for that matter, other approaches too. Include a detailed introduction before delving into ancestors. Try not to lose your reader in the minutiae of the past. Alternatively, start with the featured person and relegate really distant ancestors to footnotes or simple summaries. In either case, generally keep the narrative of subsequent generations to the deceased to protect the privacy of the living, unless the distribution is very limited. If the distribution may go beyond family members, consider just including surnames of subsequent generations, but make descendants reports available to family members. Here is an example of a surname summary. The three layout options I have used in the past pertain to columns, 1 or 2, alignment, left or justified, and font. Here are examples from two of my stories, one of my early ones on my great-grandfather, W.C. Hiles, and one of my latest ones on my great-grandfather, Charles Court. The one on the right is my preferred approach now. It has more white space, it's easier to read, and it is really easier to manage to include photographs. Another issue with which I struggled was whether to use footnotes or endnotes. They both have their advantages and their disadvantages. If noted material is generally short, consider footnotes. If noted material includes long passages, consider endnotes. Long footnotes tend to break the flow of the text and may distract from the narrative. On the other hand, endnotes may never be read. It is possible to use both, however. Endnotes for citations and footnotes for tidbits of historical or other parenthetical information. A few final comments on things to keep in mind in the narrative of your story. As I mentioned earlier, put the story in historical context. This adds a better sense of who the family is, where they came from, what hardships they may have experienced. It is determined in part by the intended audience. It must be kept relevant, and that means avoid the attractive rabbit holes and data dumps, one of my big temptations. It fits in the text or in footnotes or endnotes, depending on the importance to the story. My general rule is put it in a note if it's an aside or would otherwise be appropriate for a parenthetical. Balance family lore and documented evidence. I love to include lore in my stories, but I'm very careful to qualify it as such. Be careful about going too deep into siblings and in-laws. Their stories may be interesting, but can also complicate the narrative. I drop this information usually in a footnote, or if I have a lot, I create a separate story in an appendix. Weave memories into the story. They give it a real personal touch, and be sure you give appropriate accreditation, however. Insert overviews and wrap-ups periodically. This helps keep the reader focused. And sprinkle photographs throughout the story. Include old ones, of course, but also new photos. And I'll show you what I mean right now. Here are old photographs from my mother's photo album. And here are recent photographs of places that come up in my stories. And the ultimate ending for the Schlosser story was a family reunion in 2017 attended by over 150 people. That concludes part 3 of Genealogy in 3 parts. If you have any questions about this presentation, feel free to email me at the address noted here, susanjcourt@gmail.com. Thank you.